Welcome to the Thriving Immigrant Podcast. One of the greatest gifts that God has given us is the gift of our mind. But the intangibility nature of that gift sometimes makes us to ignore how valuable that gift is. And if you've paid attention to how our world operates or how the world really operates, you would agree with me that most tangible things that we admire and appreciate are actually driven by intangible things. And that's why one of my favorite quotes is the quote from Robin Sharma, which says, everything happens twice, first in our mind, then in reality. So if you agree with me that your mind is one of your greatest assets, I'm sure you also agree with me that it's your responsibility to protect, preserve, and nurture that asset. And I'm really excited about today's conversation. I've got a mindfulness coach on the call. She's not just a mindfulness coach, she also has almost 3 decades of professional experience in human resource management in the Canadian workspace. Her name is Rachel Collins. Hi, Rachel. Welcome to the Thriving Immigrant Podcast. We are so blessed to have you.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to connect with you and have this conversation.
Great. Okay. I'm really so pumped to have this conversation because I'm very passionate about mindfulness and mental health. So, do you want to introduce yourself and just share a little bit about your HR experience and how you found yourself in that field?
Sure. Rachel Collins, my background is primarily in recruitment. So I had started off actually doing a master's degree in sociology and then trying to figure out like what I wanted to do next with my life. So originally I had thought that I would, kind of go the professor route. But I very early realized that I thrive in connecting with people. I really love connecting with people. And so once I kind of, had that realization, it was just like, how can I use that skill or that gift to make a living? And recruitment was actually a very natural path towards that. It wasn't something I necessarily set out to do. It was something more that I stumbled into and that I found that I absolutely loved. And 3 decades later, it is still what I'm doing for a living. So yeah, I think sometimes these things just happen. Like sometimes we set out to have a particular path, and other times that path calls to us.
Hmm.
It's been a really great career, and really pleased to still be doing that work. But I have other paths that call to me as well. And so on the side, I have a lot of different passion projects that I've been doing to really, I'd say like I have this calling to make a statement in the world, right? To share my voice. And so I've been doing a lot of writing. I have a book that's come out, but I've also been doing some group coaching or training programs as well that are really around mindful productivity.
Hmm.
And I'd say the connection to this is like, it's not necessarily something that, kind of comes from my HR background, but it's something that has really helped me in doing the work that I do in HR as well. And so mindful productivity is really about kind of that moment of awareness, that present moment awareness, often linked with compassion and gratitude, and then coupling that with action. So really prioritizing what we want to take action on. And so I have found that just a beautiful framework, both in my professional life in human resources, but also in terms of, accomplishing what I want to on the side for myself as passion projects, and just a very versatile framework for getting things done. So that's a little bit about my story and kind of how I came into this work.
Amazing. I really love your story in the sense that I think you have a very fascinating profile. When I checked you on LinkedIn, I was like, okay, who does HR for 30 years? And now you're talking about other things that you also enjoy doing. Just makes it more interesting. So thank you for sharing all that. Now let's talk about mindfulness. But I want to start by asking you that, do you think it's possible to achieve work-life balance?
I think it's really challenging. I don't think it's realistic. What I would say is, our energy ebbs and flows, right? Our time ebbs and flows. And so if you're looking at kind of having that perfect balance every day, I don't think that's realistic. But what I do think is realistic, what I do think is achievable, even for, very busy entrepreneurs or people that have these types of passionate side projects, is I do think we can be very mindful and aware of where we want to invest our time and our energy. And so I think where people, kind of struggle with work-life balance is they think, I've got to do it all, right? And so if you look at my scenario, I'm working full time, I'm a mother, I'm a caregiver, I have aging parents, I do writing, I do art. There's a number of things, right, on my plate. And I'm never going to have a day where, all of these are kind of getting enough attention or equal attention. But what I can do is I can make really intentional, mindful choices around where I want to invest my time. And I can prioritize making sure that there's some time for me and for the things I absolutely love to do in that. And so I don't have to have a ton of time, right? But the time that I do have, I want to have it like guilt-free, right? I want to be able to say, this is time for me, and it's time that I'm going to enjoy. And so I think that when we try to like start prioritizing and we kind of stop scattering our energy, we're able to lean in and do things that we're really passionate about, that we feel energized by, that we feel good about. And so we're not going to kind of have that work-life balance, but we're going to enjoy where we're spending our time.
Mm,
And the other thing I kind of like to factor into this is the Pareto principle, right? So, 20% of your effort, resulting in, 80% of the results, right?
but
And so knowing that we can't do it all, knowing that, it's just impossible, right, for everybody to do it all, um, just really taking time to kind of think through what's going to move the dial most in terms of the direction I want my life to go, and
mm,
how can I carve out time for like that 20% of effort that's going to have the biggest impact and the biggest results. And that does mean saying no to a lot of things, right? Like, let's be transparent about it. It means making choices. But I think that you can be really empowering if you just have a framework for yourself that kind of allows you to make those choices in a way that's non-judgmental, that's guilt-free, and really allows you to kind of articulate or explain to other people the choices that you're making and why you're making them. And it just really empowers you to, where you are investing your time, make sure that it's going to make a difference and that you're going to enjoy it.
oh wow, that was very powerful and quite comprehensive. I really love how you talked about it, and you were being real, like letting us know that it's difficult to achieve that balance. It's just about prioritizing what really matters to you, and that gives you that energy. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, for someone listening to me right now, and the person is saying, okay, I want to start practicing mindfulness, and you've talked about frameworks like two, three times, are there
Mhm.
any maybe simple exercise that you think someone can do to start practicing mindfulness?
Yes, this is the beautiful thing about mindfulness is it doesn't take a lot of time, right? It really is about intention and about how you're approaching things. And so what I would say in terms of mindfulness, I came to this work through the writing of John Kabat-Zinn, and he has some really just great tools and resources available both in books, but there's also, groups that will meet on this as well. And the idea here is that you pay attention to the present moment, that you're fully in the present moment. And
Mm,
so instead of worrying about the past or thinking about the future, you're here now. And that is something that it can be really challenging to train your mind to do that. But when you do that, you're able to reduce a lot of stress and you're able to focus much more fully on being present. and in a way that's non-judgmental and that's really compassionate. And so, there's some really easy tools that you can explore to get there. One of the ones that I love, and it's so simple to do, is mindful breathing. And so when you're doing that, like the idea is to focus fully and completely on your breath. And so you breathe in, pause, exhale. And if you just sit and do that, focusing on your breath for 1, 2 minutes at a time, what it does is it clears your mind so that you're not, have all of these things kind of nagging at you of future, past, things you should be doing. You're just fully present and focused on your breath. And believe it or not, it's incredibly hard to do that for most people. If I say sit and pay attention to your breath for a full 5 minutes, most people, our minds will start kind of pinging onto different topics. And so uh, there's a lot to be gained by doing this. And by just gently kind of self-correcting and bringing yourself back to your breath when you find your mind is wandering. And
Hmm.
so, 1 minute, 2 minute, 5 minutes, that's something you can incorporate into your day, multiple times. Anytime you're feeling stressed, anytime you're feeling, anxiety, anytime you're starting to, lose focus, if you just spend a few minutes with your breath, it is absolutely amazing what a difference that can make.
Wow, I'm gonna start doing that. Thank you. You said something that really attracted me. You talked about being living in the present, and that reminds me of a quote. The quote is, if you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. But if you are at peace, you are living in the present. So since I stumbled on that quote, it's been very helpful. Then when I thought about it, I was like, this makes a lot of sense. Because most times when people are going through maybe some depression, it's usually based on what happened in the past. And when you have some fears, like you don't know what the future holds, that's what brings anxiety. So it's important to live in the present. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I would build on to that to say that, the other thing that, causes a lot of kind of the stress or anxiety is, feeling like you have to do things perfectly or there's one way to do things. And so if you're able to kind of get to that place where you have this non-judgmental awareness and acceptance, it's incredibly powerful. And so in the example you just gave, right? Like maybe somebody's really, ruminating about the past or they're very worried about the future. Being able to kind of like take that time, connect with your breath, observe your feelings, observe what you're thinking, and then name that in a non-judgmental way.
Hmm.
It dissipates some of the energy of that. And so if you can say, you know what, I'm recognizing that I'm living in fear, right? I'm recognizing that a lot of my energy is going into worry. But you do that in a way that doesn't beat yourself up, right? You just do it in a way that names it, observes it, lets it go. You can move through some of that energy and it doesn't have the same power, right? It doesn't hold you in the same way because you've been able to put a name or a label to it. And so that's one of the other things that you can do through mindfulness is really, get in touch with, what's driving things and then just be very compassionate with yourself around it.
Hmm.
The way you would with a friend, right? If you had a friend who came to you and said, I'm really worried about this, right? How might you, create acceptance for that friend or compassion for that friend? And you learn to do that for yourself. And it's such a powerful technique and really easy to learn, right? This is not complicated, which is this part of the beauty of it. It's, it takes a lot of practice to get there, right? But it's not complicated.
Interesting. Okay. Right. That sounds very powerful. I'm learning a lot from this conversation. Thank you for sharing all those gems. There's something else I wanted to ask you about mindfulness. But before then, let's talk about the Canadian workspace. You've been you've been there all your life. Do you think there's how has that space, how has it evolved in the last 30 years? You've worked with different generations, and can you remember when you started and what it looked like then versus what it looks like now?
Yeah, so I would say that it feels to me like the pace of change has sped up exponentially.
Hmm.
Obviously organizations are always changing, they're always growing. But if you look at the rate of development, like the skills that we need to have to keep up with things, right? How fast technology is changing, the volume of email, right?
Emails.
Exponential growth. Like who can keep up with their email, right? So a lot of businesses are going to, other things like MS Teams or Slack or different kind of channels, right? And then you layer into that a lot of generational change and a lot of kind of knowledge that's kind of getting lost as like some of those older generations are starting to retire. You're in a situation where it's just very rapid change, and transparently it's hard to keep up sometimes. I think that we're at a really interesting moment where I think that if you look at kind of the like what people can do, right, to be valuable employees or to kind of enhance their ability to find work. Um, Obviously, keeping your skills current, being able to kind of name the value that you bring is really important. But I think just as important is kind of the communication skills, the connections, the networking. Even though things are changing so quickly around us, those day-to-day people skills are really
Hmm.
things that will help distinguish people kind of in this age of rapid transformation and AI. And so while everything feels like it's like whirling around us super fast, when you kind of strip it down to the base level, the day-to-day ability to communicate, to connect, to prioritize, to create, to move value, to bring value. All I'd say, are fundamental skills that, still remain and lie underneath everything. And I also look at like a lot of businesses, are really becoming more mindful, like as everything changes so quickly,
Hmm.
how it is that they're going to create good customer experiences and kind of keep their customer at the center of everything they're doing. And so that's another kind of trend that I would see in terms of the business changes. So lots going on. It's a really interesting and exciting time. I feel like the newer folks coming into the workforce, they don't necessarily have kind of that patience and that big picture vision, right? And they want to get promoted and move up very rapidly. And so there's a lot of generational shifts that way. I think a lot of your audience is entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And I suspect that when you kind of look at, some of these forces that are driving all these changes, you're probably going to find more people wanting to be entrepreneurial, right? And
Hmm.
be able to kind of like, take the reins to create something that's meaningful. And I think we'll have, over time, probably more mobility to kind of move between those different types of work, right? So, if you look at like my situation, I'm working full time professionally, but I have a business interest off the side as well, right? And I think those kind of blended scenarios are going to become more common just as things continue to transform this way. So it's a really exciting time. I think some people would see it as a very scary time as well. A lot of unknowns with what will happen with AI, but I still think at the end of the day, it's all about people.
Yeah. You made you made some very valid points, which I agree, especially coming from you that I'm sure when you look back to how you started work, you will be like, okay, maybe there were no Teams, maybe there were no Slack then, but a lot has changed, a lot has evolved in the last 10, 15 years. I think we've even seen some accelerated growth in the tech space in the last 4 years than we've experienced before.
Mhm.
So it's exciting. At the same time, it can be scary, but I think there are more opportunities now for the current generation than any other generation that's come to this world. Because, for example, we're having this conversation from two different locations. I'm in Ontario, you are in Alberta. Thank
Yeah.
God for technology. And yeah, So that's a very good one. Thank you for sharing that. I was going to ask you because some of my audience too, they are immigrants, and you may not be able to really speak to this because you may not really understand the unique challenges of immigrants. But when immigrants move to this part of the world, they experience a high level of stress due to major transitions and all that. And I know that you've talked about some things that we can do to stay mindful or to practice mindfulness. Are there any other things that you think you want to share that will help this set of people, immigrants coming into the country at this time?
Yeah, it's really interesting because everybody's journey is so different, right? And so I think
Right.
that when you're coming in, if you have like a really well-established network and support systems, right, then that looks really different than if you're moving with, just maybe you and your family and you don't have that, right? And so I would say that I would encourage people not to do this work in isolation, right?
Mm,
I think that mindfulness is something that we can do individually, but I think that having dialogue around it and finding support and finding other people that are interested in kind of being a community of support for each other, um, just it takes that to a place where, it's not an individual stress. It's more like having a network of people, right? And so I would say, it's great to have this conversation. It's great to kind of be in connection with others. I think the more you're in conversation, the bigger you have your network of, not necessarily bigger, but kind of the more you curate your network of people that you surround yourself with. It just allows you not to have all that stress and isolation. Jim Rohn had a very famous quote where he said, "You are the sum of like the five people that you surround yourself with." Right.
yeah.
And so if you can find people that uplift you, that motivate you, that show kindness, that show mindfulness, right? That show many of these things that you kind of want to have for yourself, right? If we can each do that, I just think that it makes such a difference not to be alone on the journey. From a stress management perspective, I would encourage people, like there's different levels of stress, right? And so
Yeah.
if it is debilitating, right? If it is like, something that is like really affecting your quality of life and your health and your mental well-being, like seek professional help, right?
Mm,
I think that when I think about the Canadian culture, and I think about those different trends that have happened, we have gotten much better about like asking for help and talking about mental health than we were
yeah.
10 years ago, right?
Mm,
And so I think not everybody's comfortable with that, but I think, if you need to, like asking for help is really, really good. And then in terms of just like that personal kind of stress management, I would say from a mindfulness perspective, that's where the different activities can kind of come in. And you can really integrate them into your life in very little subtle ways that make a huge difference. So I talked about the mindful breathing, right? That's one of the things that you can do. There's another one that I really like, which is called like a 5 sense check-in. And so all of this is really about kind of bringing yourself back into this moment, so that you're not, worried about the past or worried about the future, but you're here now, right? And so really fully present here in this moment. And when you are, a lot of that stress you may find will naturally fade away because a lot of the stress kind of comes from our expectations,
mm,
or kind of trying to control the future. But where if we can be here now in this moment, appreciating with gratitude what we have, it's harder to hold on to that stress. And so, there's lots of different activities you can do, but a body scan would be one of those that's very common in the mindfulness practice. Just paying attention to every area of your body, seeing if there's tension, releasing that tension. Another one is a 5 sense check-in. And so the way that this works is basically, and it doesn't take much time, right? This is like a minute or less. but you just pause and you observe. And so if you looked around your room, you would say, okay, what are 5 things I can see? And you just take time to notice, right? 5 things in your space. What are 4 things I can feel? So 4 things I can touch. And you just kind of take that moment to pause and feel those things in your space. What are 3 things that I can hear? So I'm just listening to, like, are there birds? Do I hear the hum of the refrigerator? Just kind of brings me once again into that space. 2 things that I can smell, and then 1 thing that I can taste. And so you can see in, like, a minute or less. I don't know how it feels for you, but for me, I just feel this kind of grounding in my body and this relaxation, because it's really hard to be stressed and busy and thinking about other things when you're just paying attention to those 5 senses. And just taking that moment to do that, just can help reset things, and then reset your perspective and really just kind of open you up to new possibilities or opportunities or a sense of openness, a sense of compassion. And so it really is around, just those small things that you can do for yourself, to create that kind of sense of openness.
Wow. How, Rachel, this has been a very insightful conversation. I'm just hearing 5 cents check for the first time, and I'm trying to do that while you're talking about it, and it makes a whole lot of sense. So let me see if I got it well. 5 things I can touch,
5 things you can see.
five
Yeah.
things I can see. Yeah.
Yeah.
4 things I can touch,
Hmm.
3 things I can hear,
Yeah.
2 things I can smell,
Hmm.
and 1 thing I can taste.
Yes, you got it.
Okay. Sounds like a very simple but yet powerful concept. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I'm not going to let you spill everything on the show. You mentioned that you write a lot, you have some books, and you also have some resources. How can people contact you? Where can we access all those resources?
Yes. So my website is passionpurpose.today. And so on my website, you'll find links to my books, the programs that I offer. There's some downloads there as well around mindful productivity, that your listeners may find very helpful. And so that's a really great place to start. I also recommend connecting with me on LinkedIn. And I just recently started up a mindful productivity community on LinkedIn. And so that's
Awesome.
a really great way to connect. I am doing a regular kind of newsletter and some articles on Medium. And so if you connect with me on LinkedIn, you're sure to have access to all of that content. And likewise, once again, website passionpurpose.today.
Passion Purpose today. Okay, sounds great. Thank you for giving us your time. It's been an amazing time with Rachel Collins today on the Thriving Immigrant Podcast. But before I let you go, is there what I usually love to ask my guests this question? What is the most powerful piece of advice that you have ever received?
Yeah, the most powerful piece of advice that I've ever received, um, it was from a book, so it wasn't from a person. But it was a book called Creative Visualization by Shakti Gawain. And what it is it's really around like creating for yourself kind of like a vision, right, of where you want life to go, what you want to accomplish, right, what you want to be, do, have, feel. So, having this sense of what it is that you want to create in your life. But the piece of advice that she gave that I found really, really powerful was that you don't want to cling to that. And so you want to create a sense of possibility and a direction and where you're going, what you're building. But you
Hmm.
don't want to cling so tightly to that that you don't see other opportunities as they come up. And
Hmm.
so, what she says when you're doing visualization is that you should always add to the end of it, this or something more. And so if I'm visualizing that, I want to be, a best-selling author, right? I want to be a writer. I want my book to be like a top seller. I could add into that this or something more for the highest good of all concerned. And
Hmm.
what that does is it just opens up possibility that there is, let's call it a gift from God or from the universe, but a plan, right? That is greater than myself. And that to be, while having a direction is really good, at the same time, you just want to be open to seeing possibility and taking advantage of opportunities as they come available. And so I just love that piece of advice, just to, always close what you're visualizing with this or something better for all concerned.
Profound. I like it. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's good not to be so rigid and just to give room for opportunities and possibilities. That makes sense. Okay. It's been an amazing time with Rachel Collins. She's a mindfulness coach. You can reach out to her on LinkedIn. Are you on Instagram or any other social media channel?
No, so I have on YouTube, I have a channel where I'm putting the podcast interviews.
Okay.
But I'd say predominantly LinkedIn and Medium are the primary venues. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so you can always connect with Rachel Collins on LinkedIn and you can visit our website, passionpurpose.today.
Yeah,
Correct?
that's right. You got it.
Okay. Okay. So thank you so much. If you are listening to me for the first time, I'm sure you've learned one or two things today, and I'm sure you found this insightful. Thank you for tuning in. Please share this episode with someone. Let's build a thriving community together. And thank you so much for your time, Rachel. Looking forward to maybe another opportunity to host you one more time. And thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. It was a wonderful conversation. It was great to spend time with you.
Awesome. Okay, on this note, have a wonderful day, everyone. And till I come your way again, stay thriving.